On the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use. Welcome to the GBC Podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. This is episode 57, created on October 16th, 2023. I'm John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota, and Neil out on the East Coast. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what you're drinking.
We are traveling out to Colorado this week. And in view of that, I figured a Colorado beer was most appropriate. This is a New Belgium Cryo Ranger IPA.
All right. And tonight, for no particular reason, I'm having a Bell's Special Double Cream Stout.
And I went just as frothy as you, Jeff. I have a Colorado Bulldog that I've mixed together because we are headed to Colorado. You can find us on YouTube and Twitter at Green Bay Chat and Facebook at the GBC Podcast, Green Bay Chat, and just the audio is available on Spotify by searching for Green Bay Chat. Well, what is our topic this week? It is the GBC Podcast going to Denver. That's right. We are getting ready to get on the road to go watch the Packers and the Broncos play at Empower Field at Mile High. The weather for this Sunday, Neil? Sunny and 74. At least that's the latest prognostication. That's a little bit better than what we saw.
John is still going to bring his snow pants, by the way.
I am still going to bring my snow pants just in case. Other than that, we'll preview that Broncos game. We maybe get caught up here with some other games that happened in the league in week 6. But for tonight, we have a guest as well to talk Broncos with us. We have a podcaster that covers the Denver Broncos. We'll be talking to her in a little bit and a little bit of a history lesson to wrap things up. But let's take a look ahead at the week ahead from the redundancy department. Neil, Jeff, are your bags packed? Are you ready to go?
No.
John, I'm a veteran traveler. I might get my bags packed on Friday morning, but there's no guarantee. Okay. It might be Friday afternoon.
I say, we really don't have definite plans. We know what time we land. We know what time we can check in. We know what time we're leaving on Monday. We know what time the game is on Sunday. But outside of that, it's we're going to piece some things together here yet this week.
But we've got a sweet place that's right near Mile High Field.
Oh, yeah.
And each year that we've done this road trip of the three of us, we've added more and more people. So the first year to Cincinnati, there were 3. Last year, we took Dave as a 4th. This year, we've got 10 of our friends going back to high school are going to be with us at this trip. We're looking forward to a really fun time.
Strength in numbers, strength in Packer fans. I think there's going to be a lot of green and gold in the stands with the Broncos struggles so far this year. And the Packers, obviously, fans travel extremely well anyway. I think there's going to be, like I said, a lot of green and gold at Mile High this coming Sunday.
And a lot of green and gold at Mile High means that there's going to be a lot of green and gold all over Denver the whole weekend. And that should be one of the fun elements of the weekend is meeting up with Packers fans. That is certainly one of my favorite things about traveling to road games is meeting up with Packers fans everywhere that we go.
Serendipitously as well. It's better to be lucky than good, which we certainly were. Last year, I think a lot of things really fell in our favor as well. So hopefully we can keep that string going, run into random Packer fans, share stories. And as most Packer fans are, no matter where you see them in the world, they love to sit down and share a beverage and talk the Packers and tell their story.
Jeff, you mentioned our last 2 trips. We knew going to Cincinnati, we were going to try Cincinnati chili. We knew going to Buffalo, we were doing a wing tour, and we did a wing tour really well.
Yes, we did.
But outside of Rocky Mountain oysters, what is there that's Denver related that we really need to try? I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet. We'll work that out. But we do know there is at least a Packer party going on Saturday.
There is. As most Packer fans know, there are Packer bars throughout the world, frankly, but especially throughout the United States. So there's also an organization called Packers Everywhere. And so they are sponsoring a pep rally in Denver for this road game. And that's going to be Saturday afternoon. Looks like at Tom's Watch Bar. We're right downtown Denver. And looks like there's going to be a couple Packers alumni there, Don Horn and Walter Stanley. There's going to be some other, looks like a roundtable discussion. Fans have an opportunity, looks like, to win some prizes and basically just hang out with other like-minded Packer fans, I guess. Again, that's at Tom's Watch Bar. and that's also on the Packer website as well.
I did just look it up. It's on 19th Street, right? It's a block away from Coors Field. Coors at Blake and 20th. Tom's Watch. So that'll be a nice walk in that area.
We'll kind of see where we end up. That's been a good plan in the past, and it's worked out pretty well.
Neil, are you bringing your hiking shoes? Are you ready to do a 14,000 footer on Saturday?
I'm not going to be doing that on Saturday. On Saturday, I'm actually going to be, at least early on, watching the Arsenal match with the Denver Gooners. That's one of the things that I enjoy doing when I'm traveling, is also going to the Arsenal clubs in various cities. So the Denver Gooners has a lovely branch of Arsenal America, and Arsenal plays Chelsea as they come back from the interlull. So that will be a fun 2 hours. I'm looking forward to meeting the Denver Gooners.
How early, because we're going to be on Mountain Time now, Neil, how early is that match going to be for us?
Fuck, I don't remember. It would normally be a 12:30 match, which is a late afternoon match in Britain, but instead of being in the East Coast, I'm going to be in Denver. So it's a match that starts at 10:30 in the morning. So finish bar time on Friday night and get a little bit of sleep, and then wake up and watch some Arsenal and drink some beer and meet some fun Arsenal fans in Denver.
I will plan to go with you on that one. We have to figure out though if they serve breakfast, like the place in Buffalo that served breakfast. That was spectacular. We had a good trip with that one as well.
And one of the other things that's nice about going to the Arsenal bar is we're certainly going to meet Broncos fans as well and get to learn some things about Denver Broncos fandom and where we should be going pregame and all of those other things. I think that, again, the meeting the people is a lot of what the fun of these trips is. And the Denver Gooners, right? We've got this natural bond. And as you're a traveling Gooner, you are going to want to meet up, and people are very friendly about meeting up with you. So it should be a good starting point.
I think that'll be a perfect opportunity to ask some questions after being out Friday night. What is Denver known for, or whatever, spending.
Like, where should we be Saturday night? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, we can throw this out there. On Sunday, we do know of at least one Packer tailgate party. Our friend Kate is going to be tailgating. She has secured a parking pass for Lot I. So now the stadium there runs north-south. On the north side of the stadium, there's actually a Mile High monument there that I think represents the old Mile High Stadium. And then just north of that is Lot I. It's at the north end of their parking complex within the Power Field Loop. So if you are looking to go tailgating, and I think some of us are, if the parking lot opens at 10 a.m., Kate says they'll be ready to go by 10:30 a.m., and that'll go for a solid 4 hours right up until just before kickoff. So Lot I is where we will be for a good part of that Sunday morning.
Tailgating is great, and we are fortunately staying pretty close by. We're able to procure a spot really close to the stadium. So we've got a condo there, and we'll be around.
I don't want to invite all the Packer fans there because I know we would be in violation of the Airbnb.
That is
agreement,
true. I think they would frown on that fact.
But right, I mean, we might, if you need to use a toilet, I guess we would be available to help you out.
We're that close, but certainly close enough. Location. So I think this is going to add a kind of a different twist to it as well, because certainly when we for Buffalo, we had a road trip down there. I mean, once you get down there, things are pretty out of hand, but we're front and center in this one. I'm walking distance. Looking forward to it.
And then we will be around on Sunday night, and we're leaving no later than Monday evenings. Plenty of other opportunities to enjoy Denver.
Yeah.
Neil, I know we're going kind of chronological order here, but I'm going to circle back. DIA, Denver International Airport. What are your thoughts on that beautiful facility?
It's a long way from downtown Denver.
It is.
It's a lot less convenient than Stapleton, but it's pleasant enough to fly into. So the only thing that I've learned about DIA is make sure that you leave plenty of time for security, because you've got to take trains everywhere.
Well, with that said, the important part of the trip is a football game. The Denver Broncos on Thursday night lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs are now 5-1. Broncos are 1-5. And this Broncos team, they're a mess. We thought the Raiders were a mess. It turns out maybe we're not as solid as we thought we were, but this is a game where now, coming off of a bye, there has been enough time to prepare. This defense needs to be ready for playing in Denver. The offense needs to be prepared to take advantage of a team that is not really playing well on defense. But Neil, I think you probably have some stats to really look into that.
The most encouraging part about that Kansas City-Denver game was Russell Wilson's stat line. Russell Wilson was 13 of 22 for 95 yards with 4 sacks for a loss of 13, 82 net yards passing on 26 passing plays, 3.2 net yards per passing play. Kansas City doubled Denver's yards, 389 to 197. However, when I looked at the overall offensive statistics, I was a little bit surprised that Denver is actually doing better than you might guess based on that game. You look at offensive yards on the year and yards per game. Denver's actually 21st. Green Bay's 28th in offensive yards. Passing yards, they're 20th. Green Bay's 21st. As it turns out, Russell Wilson's stats and Jordan Love's stats at this point are really, really similar. Running game, they're 20th in rushing yards per game. We're 27th. Points were 13th versus 17th. So I think that we're pretty evenly matched as far as the futility, or at least the sometimes futility of our offenses. But the big difference is in the defensive side. So defensive yards per game, we're at 17th right now. Denver is 32nd. We've allowed 338 yards per game. Denver's allowed 440 yards per game. And yes, a lot of yards in that game against Miami, but you don't average 440 yards per game allowed over 6 games just based on that Miami game. They are 30th in the NFL in passing yards allowed per game at 268. 32nd in the NFL in running yards allowed per game at 172, and their defense is 32nd in points allowed per game at 33.3 points per game. Green Bay's about in the middle as far as all of those categories are concerned. So at a fundamental level, it looks really good as far as our ability to move the ball against their defense. And given what our offense needs, they need to have some consistent performances. They need to be able to sustain some drives. This looks like the appropriate defense for getting our offense right.
You're saying there's a chance.
I'm saying there's a chance. And kind of related to the fact that they've got offense that is similar to ours and not great, but not at the bottom of the league. They also have this lack of offensive identity that we have as well. So neither team has a receiver that is in the top 50 in yards for NFL receivers. They've got Cortland Sutton at 51st with 275.
He's on my fantasy team.
Nobody cares about your fantasy team. We've got Dobbs at 63rd. And also going to that lack of identity on either team's offense, neither team has a running back in the top 36 yards. 36, by the way, is Daniel Jones. Our top running back is A.J. Dillon at 37th, behind Daniel Jones at 194 yards. So a lack of identity is a central component of both teams as far as their offenses are concerned. But the big advantage is we get to face Denver's defense.
I was looking at the point differentials overall, and I was expecting to see Denver dead last. They're actually not in the NFL, if you can believe it. So the Giants are the worst at minus 96. The Panthers are at minus 74, and then Denver's at minus 71. We're 0. We're exactly 113 points scored, 113 points given up. With a 0-point differential, that's saying something for the defense. Denver is third worst at a minus 71 point differential.
We're even, Steven.
One other place where we have an advantage is in turnovers. We are at +2 on the season. Denver is at -5 on the season.
Neil, you mentioned the two quarterbacks and how similar their stat lines are. But when you break it down, one of those quarterbacks is a young player who has an upward trajectory. The other one is on the back end of might have been a Hall of Fame arc, which leads to the question, was Russell Wilson on a Hall of Fame career? And if so, is he playing himself out of the Hall of Fame with how terrible, I guess, for lack of a better word, he's been the last 2 seasons?
The biggest argument for Russell Wilson is, he went to 2 Super Bowls and won 1 Super Bowl. I mean, there's obviously roles of their defense, but his play also played a role in their Super Bowl performances and in the Super Bowl victory. I think the biggest knock against Russell Wilson is that he's never put together a complete season. He's been in the MVP race for a number of seasons, but always essentially only played half a season and fallen off. But yeah, there's no doubt the last 2 years have really hurt his trajectory towards a Hall of Fame career. And I think it would take a miracle at this point for Russell Wilson to become a Hall of Famer.
It kind of begs the question. I mean, is he trying to overplay that, right? I mean, is he trying to, make up for that lost glory, that lost, whatever? Because it seemed not effortless, but, obviously a lot of preparation goes into it, but it seems like he's trying so hard to make something happen. And last year, for various reasons, it didn't. But I mean, under a different coach now, an experienced Super Bowl winning coach. But I think just the team itself seems to be just in a great deal of turmoil, and so therefore nothing's really settled, and therefore it's just almost like every man for himself at this point. And so he's just going to play and maybe try and pad his stats. I don't know, but who's he going to throw to? Who's going to run the ball, kind of thing. And so it's a not a great position to be in, certainly.
Yeah, although again, his stats aren't actually terrible. He's got 12 touchdowns. He's actually fourth in the NFL in touchdown passes this year and only has 4 interception and 99.0 traditional quarterback rating. So the numbers aren't terrible. The numbers are certainly perfectly reasonable for a player of his caliber, but you look at all of the rest of the team around him and it's a different story. And I think the number of sacks that he's taken has played a central role as far as that. By the traditional quarterback rating, he's 99, which is really good. But by the more advanced QBR, he's 39.7, which is below average. And that takes into account all of these other elements of quarterbacking.
And kind of a big picture thing, you talked about identity too, Neil. This Packer team, it's a young team, but they definitely need to find that identity. Now, this team, if you combine it with last season, they are 7-10 over the last 17 games. They were 8-9 last year. I think a lot of people predicted them to be at that 8-9, possibly 7-10. But the fact that over 17 games, they are 7-10. It is a 500, possibly sub 500 team that's playing. It is kind of indicative of the identity of this team, that they just haven't found that spark that's putting them over the top. And we talked about it. It's probably that lack of veteran leadership on the field that is keeping them from getting over that hump.
Our defense obviously should have plenty of candidates for veteran leadership, and yet for various reasons, we have not seen that leadership rise. Preston Smith is certainly at his moments in this year. Kenny Clark has had plenty of moments this year, but we're not seeing that overall leadership, that person who is taking control. And maybe this is when you thought Jair might be actually rising to that level, but for whatever reasons, it's not there yet. And when we did our season preview, it was all about, well, we need the defense to carry the team, not just the defense to perform adequately. We need the defense to carry the team. And maybe this is the week where the defense really makes its mark and where the defense actually carries this team enough to lead us to victory.
Well, and one thing that I'm a little disappointed in, I guess, is the coaching as well. Some of these games, Matt LaFleur, he's been a coach, so I'm not sure if it's a preparation piece. The players play the game, obviously, but at some point there's a preparation piece that the coaches are responsible for getting the players ready. And you kind of wonder if there's a disconnect there a little bit as well. I mean, because this is not a new regime. This is year 5. They should be pretty settled in. They should know what's going on. And they've obviously had winning success. If there's this regression, why is this happening? That's my biggest kind of concern or take. Can things get turned around? Well, of course, that's the hope. And I think that's been sort of some of the frustration as well, that these aren't blowout losses by any means, but it's just a matter of sort of the little things, the razor thin edge of making little mistakes or not executing literally just a handful of plays makes a difference in the final outcome of the game. So just, tweaking that a little bit. Again, maybe this early bye week initially was like, oh, maybe not in the beginning of the season, but maybe this came at a good time where they're going to figure out an identity. The coaching staff is, kind of settled in now and like, okay, we've got a long season coming up to go. How do they react with their first game back against what on paper or in theory could be a win, should be a win perhaps?
And with that, it's time for our guest. We are looking ahead to our trip to Denver. So we brought in someone who really knows the Denver Broncos. Her name is Lindsay. She is part of the Crush podcast. She writes for Mile High Sports. She doesn't really live in Denver, so we're going to give her a little bit of a hard time about that. But she is with us tonight. Lindsay, thanks for reaching out to us, and agreeing to jump in to be a guest tonight. How are things where you are?
Things are good. I live in Orange County, California. If you've ever seen us on the news, it's probably for something ridiculous. But my heart is in Denver.
Now, how did that happen? How does a Southern California girl become a Denver Broncos fan and podcaster?
So my mom and my grandma grew up in Denver. I'm 29. So the Chargers were in San Diego, but there wasn't an LA team. So it's not like my mom moved here and was like, let's root for the hometown team. And my grandma, rest in peace, she used to say, anyone who doesn't know who John Elway is no friend of mine. And like, with a serious face. So I didn't really have a choice, but that woman was very diehard. This is not morbid, so just bear with me. She died about a week after Super Bowl 51. And my theory has always been she watched one season post Peyton Manning and was like, I'm good. Like, I got my Super Bowl. I'm good. I'm out. And she was right. It's been all downhill since.
you clearly don't remember Super Bowl 32. We'd like to forget Super Bowl 32, which is a different story altogether. But growing up with the Broncos family, tell me how that kind of culminated for you, because about 10 years ago when you had Peyton Manning there, you do have a team that resurges, you get a great defense, you get another Super Bowl victory. What was that like for you?
I did not realize how much I was taking for granted having a team that's fun, having a team that is going to make the playoffs every season, is going to be exciting, is going to be talked about on all of the shows and the podcast in like a fun way, not just wow, this team is depressing, and all the stuff they're saying. Oh my gosh, what I would do to relive those glory days.
Right? Yeah. So yeah, we grew up in Green Bay in the 70s and 80s. We know the doldrums, but you're right. There is a point where fans take it for granted. They don't realize how good they have it. And so yeah, 10 years ago, you had a team that was great, and now they are looking for an identity. I mean, you've got a new owner, you've got a new coach, you've got a quarterback who's on the back end of his career, and a team that, sorry to say, just isn't putting it together. How has this been for you as a podcaster and as a writer this year? What positives are you finding in this team?
I mean, it's not been fun. I mean,
it is. I saw Neil smirk there, so I
mean, look, football is football. It's better than not football.
Exactly.
I think.
Amen. Yep.
I think what has made these last 2 years, and particularly this year, so much harder is we finally felt like we got to come in with having expectations. We felt like we got to come in being excited. And at least in years past, like we knew it was going to be shit. And so when it was, it's like, all right, this sucks, but we didn't get excited. Like when I will never forget where I was when I found out Russell Wilson was coming to the Broncos. Like in that moment, you could have told me my entire family burned alive in a fire. And I would have been like, you know what? Like you win some, you lose some. Like it's fine. It was just because it came out of nowhere, right? Like the Aaron Rodgers trade was so anticlimactic because you knew it was coming for weeks.
Ever.
I mean, this just came out of nowhere. So it was so exciting. And then obviously last year win as it did, but then it's like, all right, but Sean Payton now, like we're gonna get it together. It's gonna be great. And somehow it's worse than last year. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. Like, I get why last year didn't work. I just don't understand how, though, this year got so much worse.
So what is actually happening? What is the real problem with this team? Because you look on paper and Russell Wilson's stats don't look that bad overall. What's not working for this Denver team?
Yeah, if you don't look at this, the past 2 weeks, but especially this week against Kansas City, his stats, I think he was on track for something like 38 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, which if you had asked me at the beginning of the season, Lindsay, how are you going to feel if Russell Wilson is on track for those kind of stats? I would have been like, hallelujah, like God is good. We are here. And the fact that somehow is not translating into wins is mind blowing to me. So if you recall last year, the whole narrative was the offense is shit, but like the defense is good. And, if only the offense could get it together. But I want to say it was the last 5 or 6, maybe the second half. Actually, after we traded Bradley Chubb. So it was after the bye week at the trade deadline. That's really when the defense got worse and worse and worse. But it was, I feel like with sports, once there's a narrative in place, it kind of takes, like, you kind of miss when that narrative changes. So I think a lot of people didn't realize that was happening. And going into this season, the same thing, like it's mainly the same players. A lot of the signings that we had were more on the offensive line, and those players just aren't producing. I mean, the fact that Randy Gregory got cut because he was not performing is like, I still can't believe. And I watched him play, and it was atrocious this year. But like, if you had told me Randy Gregory is going to get traded for a 6th round pick, I would, again, it's insane.
Well, the official line on that is we're concentrating on the youth of the team, right?
Yeah.
And we're kind of in that same boat. We've got a young team. What we keep talking about the Packer defense is there's just not that solid veteran leader. And again, talking about those Bronco teams 10 years ago, you had a Hall of Famer in Champ Bailey on that team. he's been gone for a while. So is there anybody there that is filling that void or should be filling that void on the Bronco defense?
I mean, you say Champ Bailey, and then you can also say then Peyton Manning. Then you can also say Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware, then Von Miller. If there was to be a leader, I would say it's Justin Simmons, who, if he was on pretty much any other team, would be a household name, would be a obvious Pro Bowler, but just because of the situation he's in, he gets absolutely no recognition. I could be wrong on this, but I believe he led the league in interceptions last year, or it was the year before, but somewhere in that ballpark. So he's definitely the leader. It's just, and it should be Russell Wilson, and I'm sure to some effect it is. It's just, how do you lead losers? And I'm not saying that the people on the team are losers, but just losing is the culture. And there's only so much that you can lead with that. And I will also say, here's my hot take. I think Sean Payton, a lot of the praise that he gets is a lot of history in the past, not so much what have you done for me lately. And that guy, I mean, I was every day waking up to some sort of news with the coaching search. That guy was leaking all sorts of stuff to the media, trying to control the narrative. Like, it was so obvious to me what was happening. And then the whole thing with Nathaniel Hackett in that article he did. And I mean, that guy causes more drama and chaos than any player on the team. So I'd be very curious to know how the players actually feel about Sean Payton, because I have not seen leadership from our coach.
One of the things about the Sean Payton New Orleans teams is that they were broadly known for having Drew Brees and then defenses that were often extremely porous. It's been stated by many people that if Drew Brees had anything that resembled a competent defense for most of his time there, he may have been, 2, 3, 4 Super Bowl appearances rather than just the single Super Bowl appearance. And you look at this Denver Broncos team and the defensive numbers are atrocious. You're allowing 440 yards a game to the opposing team. Is this a defensive coaching problem, or is it a problem of not enough defensive talent, or both?
I think it's a combination of both. Like I said, last year, the offense was amazing. And Giro Evero, that was our defensive coordinator last year, was getting all of this praise. And then Bradley Chubb got traded away and the defense just got worse and worse and worse. And like I said, we didn't make a whole lot of off-season moves that did anything to improve that situation. If you watch the games, you can tell there are players just not giving 100%. There are tackles that are not being made. But with that said, how can you look at a team scoring 70 points against you and not say, okay, this is clearly the scheming is atrocious. What's the most insane part, though, is that these last 2 weeks, the Broncos have lost because of the offense, and the defense has gotten a lot better. So it's like there is a curse on us where something always has to go wrong. But if you look at the body of work of Vance Joseph, I mean, he's never produced anything that praiseworthy. I mean, he's gotten a lot of credit, but when you look at the numbers, he's really I don't think he's ever put out a top 10 defense. He's never really done. I knew when the hire was made, it was there's worse hires. That was my feeling on it.
Really inspiring there.
Yeah. But going back to that overall leadership, and I think a lot of this probably comes from the top down. And if you will, do you think that Pat Bowlen's death and the change in the ownership, I mean, this team has been in turmoil for 4 years. They need to find someone who's going to give them direction. The fact that you're on, you gave a head coach a year's try, and now you're on, like you said, someone who's got a lot of laurels to him that should have brought that spark, but probably isn't. Is this coming from the top down, you think?
Oh, it's cute that you think it's only been 4 years of turmoil for this organization. So yes, the Pat Bowlen situation was bad. There was obviously no leadership whatsoever. So I think a lot of it could be blamed on that. And then with the new leadership, they own sports teams, but they don't know a whole lot about sports. So I think they came in just kind of thinking the people that did would get it together, and they could just write the checks. Now, I will say, Condoleezza Rice, she does know sports. I think she used to work she used to help Jim Harbaugh at Stanford or something like that. Like she actually has done a lot in the sports world. So so I will say everyone but her. I'd be very curious to hear the truth about how this deal went down, because I have a feeling there were some like inflated numbers, some promises that obviously haven't really come true. I think the hardest pill for me to swallow this year, because I love George Payton, our general manager. And like I said, pre-Sean Payton, I think this ownership team kind of came in and said, George, you know what you're doing. We're going to follow your lead. And what I've heard as well is that George Payton didn't even want to give Russell Wilson that extension. It was actually the ownership that did, because they wanted to get it cheaper. So I think that's like a move that I could show you right there, where they didn't really do their homework. They just kind of were like, he's good, right?
Sometimes a decision like that is made on how many jerseys you're going to sell, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I got mine. I got my mom hers, and we got them. But our GM on paper, it seems like everything he's done should work, but none of it has worked. And I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm like, oh shit, like, okay, maybe he is the problem. So that's something I've been having to wrestle with this season, because I do really like him.
Well, one of the things just with the coaching change and kind of the whole regime change, these are not players that Sean Payton maybe just giving him the benefit of the doubt, that he hasn't coached them before. They weren't drafted by him. He doesn't really have. And so if there are personality conflicts, obviously it might take a year or two to kind of sort through that, get a couple drafts in, things like that. I mean, is this sort of your kind of hope looking to the future? And at this point, this season's like, all right, F it, we're just going to play for a top 5 draft pick or something? Or, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's really depressing to have your season be done so quickly. Literally now it's like wins are bad. And that's so sad to feel. The problem is what prevents some optimism for at least the short term is there are some guaranteed contracts that were given out that no matter what happens with that player, we're going to take a hit. So, everyone keeps talking about Russell Wilson. I don't know what George Payton was thinking with this Mike McGlinchey signing. I mean, even the Randy Gregory signing the year before, again, on paper, I guess you could look at it and you saw the potential and you saw what they could do. So why not take a chance? But those are just 2 chances that have not worked out at all. And that's like, I'm sorry, even if you get the first overall pick and you get Caleb Williams, this isn't just add water in Caleb Williams and you have this magnificent team. Like there are so many holes that, regardless of what you want to do, not everyone can be the 49ers and trade away all their picks for Trey Lance and somehow still be amazing. Yeah, like that's not the norm. And so we're not, I think that's the even harder part is it's not like, okay, let's just suck this year and then we have the shot to be really good next year. It's like, okay, well, how do we work around these huge guaranteed contracts that are sinking us?
Well, guaranteed contracts plus all the draft picks you've sent away for both Payton and Wilson.
Yeah.
And the Wilson ones don't upset me. I will say the Sean Payton one, I didn't agree with it at the time, and I think it's still biting us in the butt. I was a big Dan Quinn girly, and I also like D'Amico Ryans, but I got the sense he wanted to go to Houston, and like we could have gotten Dan Quinn for free.
Well, in addition, you've got to suck worse than the Bears.
Yeah.
So I mean, not to get you.
They almost beat us, so I can't even judge.
Well, that's true in the head-to-head. If you had both end up with 1 win, unfortunately. But so we're seeing, obviously some issues this year as well. Hope springs eternal. That's, you always want to kind of look ahead and hope for the best. And, and sometimes it's just, you've got to just kind of like, oh my God, when is this like nightmare going to end?
I would say for a decade, literally a decade.
Yeah. So with that said, like what do you think we can expect as fans in the crowd? Because the one game that I watched on TV, there were a lot of people in Broncos jerseys that just looked defeated sitting in the stadium.
Miserable. Yeah. Like
how is our Sunday going to be in the stadium?
I think, this is going to sound I hope this doesn't insult you guys, but I think there are 2 games left on the schedule that Broncos country looks as winnable. And they are the Packers games and the Patriots game.
Oh, yeah.
So I do think there will be a little bit more excitement than, say, if you were to come the week the Broncos play the Bills. I think there will be a little bit more excitement for that reason alone. But
that's totally fair.
Yeah. And I mean, Broncos season tickets have been, I mean, if you wanted to get on the wait list, you're going to wait past your death. So they do have a very committed, devoted fan base. But I have heard it has been a little bit emptier than in prior years.
So how often do you get to Denver for games? Do you go to home games?
I try to go once a year. I did go to Denver in July, so I don't know if I will go to a game this year. I am going to the one in LA, Broncos Chargers game, so I do have tickets to that. But it's really fun. I went to the London game last year. That was a good time.
Okay.
That was really cool.
How is the venue there in Los Angeles? How is SoFi Stadium?
So it's beautiful, and that's where I actually saw Taylor Swift as well in August.
Nice.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Did you watch the show that was actually used for the movie?
So what's funny is, so I went to see the movie on Saturday. I know that they filmed a couple of them because when she did some of her opening monologues of 4 songs, I was like, ooh, no, that was not at our show. But the surprise songs she uses for the movie were in my show. And I was a little disappointed because they did have the camera on me during Fearless and they did not use it. So
bummer.
I know.
So as you can tell, Neil is kind of a Swiftie.
Yes.
Get it.
I did go Friday. I went to one of the shows in East Rutherford. So
Oh, okay.
We're kind of embracing the relationship because we know that Taylor needs, she needs the exposure that the NFL can give her. So she's,
don't even get me started on that. Everyone thinks I'm some crazy conspiracy theorist because I think this whole thing is completely fabricated. I think Travis Kelce signed with CAA, which is the largest Hollywood talent agency. He signed with them in May. And then all of a sudden he's dating the most famous person in the world, and the news comes out the week his brother's releasing a documentary. There's too many, and then
a lot of things kind of fell into place here, didn't they?
Yeah, and then on Saturday, I saw the pictures of them holding hands, and I was like, okay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is real. And then I saw they both made an appearance on SNL, and I was like, okay, no. Of course, those photos came out, but it's just so obvious to me. And everyone thinks I'm crazy, but I'm very passionate about pointing this out because I'm just annoyed by all of it. I know I keep bursting everyone's bubble. People are like, okay, Lindsay, but it's still fun. Like, stop sucking the fun out of it.
On your own podcast, though, have you talked about that? Have you put your conspiracy out there on the podcast?
Oh, yeah.
Now, when you came on, I told you even we were going to ask you what you're drinking. I forgot to ask you what you're drinking.
Oh, I am a Diet Coke girly through and through.
All right.
So you got the Diet Coke. Tell us about your podcast. You have a partner. And
yes.
How long you been doing it? How did you two get together? What is your podcast about?
Yeah, so it's called The Crush Podcast. So I've actually never met my co-host Shelby. We met each other through Twitter, and it's funny because I live in Orange County, California, as like a single girl, going and doing all sorts of stuff. And she's married, lives in the middle of nowhere, Montana. So we live like completely opposite lives, which I think is fun because it brings 2 very different worldviews to the podcast.
Very different.
And I started writing for Mile High Sports, I want to say July 2021. And I'd always wanted to do a podcast, but you know how it is. There's so many podcasts out there. I was like, what's the angle? Like, what makes it different? And so I thought, what about 2 female co-hosts? And originally I had started doing one with a girl named Bree who lives in Denver, and I was going through some stuff, and so I wasn't really ready to make the big leap to do it, and she was, and so she ended up joining a different podcast, and she's been hosting radio shows. She's been doing all sorts of stuff. And then so I was kind of like, I encouraged it, but I also was like, well, there goes that. And then I don't know. Shelby tweeted something about one day wanting to start a podcast, and it was like, ding,
Ooh, pick me.
Wait a minute.
Right place, right time. That's all it takes. Yep.
Yeah. So then I reached out to her and yeah, it's a lot of fun. We try to, like I said, there's so many different shows out there that we try to make ours a little bit more like, we're not going to give you all the X's and O's because there are much smarter people that do this full time for a living. But like we can make you laugh. We can talk about we can talk about our conspiracy theories, and we can talk about just the funny sides and the ridiculous tweets that Jerry Judy can't help but press send on. And we love to. It's a very fan oriented podcast, but I think it's a perspective you're not hearing on other shows.
And where do people find the Crush Podcast?
So on social media, it's at the Crush Pod. And then I believe the podcast is wherever you listen to podcasts. So Google, Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, iHeart, all of them.
And totally free, right? That's the way to do it?
Totally free. Oh, yeah. No. Yeah.
And then tell us about Mile High Sports. Is that online?
Yeah. So I write an article once a week. I do a player profile. So basically what I do is I kind of look at who's worth writing about, whether it's, someone who had a really good game, someone coming off the injury report, whatever it is. And I give you their backstory. So we spoke earlier about Josie Jewell. I did his 2 weeks ago and talked about how he grew up on a farm and his family, that farm has been in 5 generations of his family. So I give you this information that you wouldn't otherwise know, which I think makes the game feel more personal as a fan. And then obviously I tie it into what's the relevancy of this person. So like for Josie, for example, he was coming off the injured reserve and was hoping that would make a big difference on the defense. And he's been good. He looked very angry last week. You can tell there's some frustration there.
You little chip on his shoulder last week. Yeah.
Neil,
I have one question. I have one question as well. I want to ask you guys. Yes, I want to know, as diehard Packers fans, what is the opinion of Aaron Rodgers? Not, whether it's actually, I'll say Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, because I'll be real with you, I don't like either of them.
The Brett Favre is, you don't want to bring that one up because you're going to get differing opinions. I think.
Yeah. So I mean, you can see
the vast majority of Packers fans thought it was time. Essentially, we kept getting to a certain point in the playoffs and not doing anything more. And we were sort of tired of all of the drama and I've been immunized and all that sort of bullshit like that. And it was clear that he was not going to be able to recapture what he did in Super Bowl 45. And at that point, I think it's time to try something different. And I think I've got lots of family who still lives in Wisconsin. Obviously lots of friends in Wisconsin, and this seems to be a pretty general opinion. When Favre left, there was a big split between the fans as far as those, we're with Favre's last year, we were 13-3 in the NFC Championship game. So there were a lot of people, it's like we had suffered through a couple of down years. Let's let Favre do what he wants to do because he deserves it. And with Rodgers, he's had all the opportunities he needs, and it's time to move on.
Sort of wore out his welcome, I guess, as he was. I mean, Neil mentioned it, but just kind of in general, I mean, he perhaps outgrew Green Bay, it sounds weird because it is the smallest market and things like that. But just in terms of, I think, what his ideology was, kind of what he foresaw in the future, because obviously he goes from the smallest market, Green Bay, where he's sort of coveted and, whatever, even though on a national stage. Then he goes to the Jets, right? And if you've watched 3 minutes of Hard Knocks.
Oh, I did.
Right. It was just like, if you drank every time that somebody fawned over him or whatever, you'd be hammered in 10 minutes. I mean, you'd be in a coma in 15. But he kind of found that's to feed whatever he needed when he came out of his dark room. It was time to move on. And like I said, there will be obviously a kiss and make up. He'll be in the Packer Ring of Honor, Hall of Fame, etc. Sort of like with Favre as well. But I think with Favre, there's some other issues. Now, for me personally with Favre, we, as Neil mentioned earlier in the show, that the 70s and the 60s were obviously the Packer glory days. 70s and 80s, oh my God, growing up, horrible. I mean, just like the worst teams ever, right?
Our entire childhood, we had, from what we remember, we had 1 year with the winning team. We were 8-7-1 and didn't make the playoffs.
Yes.
That was
Oh
our
my
childhood with the
I mean,
That's how my
decades-
cat feels about the
dec-
Broncos.
decades of futility. So then along comes like a new regime, Reggie White, God tells Reggie to sign in Green Bay, and they trade for this kid Favre. And oh my God. So then the national media, Pat Summerall and John Madden, who were and the NFL just in the early 90s was really cranking up, right? And so it was like the perfect mix of everything that was success for Green Bay. So America's team suddenly became exciting again because of number 4 at quarterback. So it was must-see TV.
Everything just fell into place at the right time. You can see Jeff and I both have the autographed Favre jerseys up.
Yeah.
And Brett is our age.
He's 5 days older than me.
Yeah.
Literally. He just had a birthday last week.
Yeah, when he came to Green Bay in 92,
yeah,
I happened to be in Green Bay at the time and hung out with him. So we've hung out with Brett
in a bar.
And in a bar. So it's one of those things where you definitely appreciated that this team finally put something together and it became a successful organization. But the time to move on from Favre was correct. Rodgers comes in, success. The time to move on.
John, I actually disagree with you on that still, but
okay. Well, that's why we each have our own opinion. But yeah, it's but like Neil said, I think I was done with Rodgers when the whole I've been immunized bullshit came out. But I think we're definitely very thankful for the last 30 years of quarterback play that we've had out of this team.
And following up on Rodgers, nobody really sort of wanted to push him, or at least most people, I think, weren't trying to push him out. It was like, we didn't want to get rid of him just to get rid of him. It was, we want to get rid of him because we didn't want a $60 million salary. We wanted to get some draft compensation. We wanted to try something different. It wasn't an animosity towards Rodgers.
Yeah.
I would like to see him succeed with the Jets still.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, it was just time.
Neil and I were at the Packers shareholder meeting in July.
Oh.
It was a matter of when his name was brought up, there was a smattering of boos, but in general, it's just like, no, I mean, he was good. He was talked about, kept the Packers front and center on the national stage for well over a decade, right? So
yeah,
that's fine. It's when it's time to go. And there was the Jets, took a flyer, so to speak, on him. But again, you can tell that he was not crestfallen for one iota of a second, right? Like you said, in Hard Knocks, he was just basking in the adulation and the fact that he was in the world's largest media markets. He was just that up.
I mean, Brett Favre, to me, like, I don't like either of them, but to me, and you said I could say whatever I wanted on this podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He will always be the guy whose dick pics I accidentally saw at 15 years old and traumatized me. So,
good Lord.
Yeah. I remember I clicked a video because it said playing the voicemail, and I was like, ooh, I didn't warn you that it was going to include the photo he sent that reporter, and I was 15. I was like, oh my God. So it's just, that is my Brett Favre. Like, it doesn't matter what he does. That is now what is burnt into my brain.
That's a hell of a story.
Yeah. So,
all right. So now I get to tell my story.
Yes. Let's hear it.
All right. So early 90s, I actually worked at a radio station in Colorado, in one of the small towns out on the plains. And one of our biggest advertisers was Larry Spradley. Larry Spradley is one of the big car dealers in the state. He's friends with Pat Bolin. And Larry Spradley always had a seat on the plane for road games. And it was the 1994 season. The Broncos started out the season 0-4. They were miserable. Nobody wanted to see them play. And Larry, who was friends with the owner of our radio station, said, hey, do you want to go to the Seattle game in my seat? And the owner didn't want it, and the general manager didn't want it. And it kind of worked its way down to, like, I was the low man on the totem pole, but I was the news guy. And I said, well, yeah, I'll go to the Broncos Seahawks game. I didn't have a dime in my pocket, to spend. But I drove up to Denver, literally got on the team plane with the team, flew to Seattle, stayed in the team hotel, had nice seats at the game, sat with the two guys who I cannot remember their names, but they were both Bronco Hall of Famers, one from the 60s, one from the 70s. Get on the bus, sit by, Shannon Sharp on the way back onto the plane. Then we get on the plane. We're flying back to Denver. And I got the headphones on and I'm watching a movie. And all of a sudden, I get hit with a pillow. And I look behind me to my left, and the guy behind me is just asleep. And I'm like, okay, why? Okay, why? I don't know why. So I'm like, okay, no big deal. Pillow's there. Watching the movie, and then another pillow comes down the aisle. And the way the plane was set up, the front class or the first class was the ownership and the coaches. Then all the guests in the middle and the players were in the back. Well, I was the last row of the guests. So I look behind me, and here are the Denver Broncos celebrating their first win of the season with a giant pillow fight in the back of the plane, all the little airplane pillows. And they're just, it's like a whack-a-mole game. They were popping up and throwing pillows at each other, right? So I've got a pillow here. I decide I get to throw a pillow. I turn around, and there's John Elway's big dumb head peeking over a chair, and I flung that motherfucking pillow right at his head, and yeah! And that's my Denver Broncos story.
That is so much better than the story I just shared. So much better.
I didn't even see his dick in it.
No.
Well, that's a bonus, I would say, John.
Yeah, so I can say I hit John Elway with a pillow in a pillow fight on the Broncos plane. Yes.
That's so fun. I love that.
So that's my Broncos.
I just need ones.
Yeah.
That's so fun.
Yeah. Oh my God.
All right. Well, Lindsay, we want to thank you for joining us. You've been a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you.
So again, it's the Crush Pod. We still call it Twitter, so find you on Twitter.
Same.
And then anywhere that you have podcasts available, the Crush Pod, she's out there. How often do you put one out? Is it a weekly?
Yeah, we do it weekly. We didn't do one last week just because there was a game Sunday, then there was a game Thursday.
Yeah,
and I'm like, by
week,
the time we record, it's like, then this podcast is pointless. So we're going to record tomorrow. So we'll do
you know
it.
How that goes, right, Neil?
Yeah.
Well, any words of wisdom for Sunday for the Packers-Broncos game? Parting thoughts before we let you go?
And who do you think is going to win?
Yeah.
Who do I think? Do we know do they have the points favorites yet out?
Right now, last I saw, Packers are favored by 1.5.
So it's pretty even.
Yeah,
you can tell I'm really into game. You can tell I'm really into sports betting. Do they have the points favorites spread?
Thingy.
I knew what you meant.
It's not legal in California. Honestly, like this is probably the most even game the Broncos are going to have. I'm going to give it to the Broncos. Okay. I'm going to give it to the Broncos because I think the defense, if the defense plays how it played against the Chiefs and the Jets, the Packers don't really have a very good defense. So the Broncos just need to be competent. It shouldn't be that much to ask for, but we are speaking about the Denver Broncos here.
That's quite a caveat right now, though, right?
Yes. So I will, based on this logic, I will give it to the Broncos, but it's not, I would not bet anything of value or not on value on
well, our plan is to give it to the Broncos in a different way. If we get our hands on pillows, we're definitely throwing them at someone's big dumb head.
As you should. But oh my gosh, you're gonna be like, you know how the new trend, it seems like I see on Twitter, is every week some super violent fight is happening at a stadium. It's
we're not doing that.
We're not getting
you guys, but a pillow fight.
Yeah,
maybe a pillow fight. Yes,
I was a kinder, gentler pillow fight, maybe.
Yes. The Denver Broncos looking like the sorority scene in Animal House on the back of an airplane with a pillow fight. Nice. Okay, Lindsay, thank you again for joining us. We'll put the links up in our Twitter and let everybody know that you joined us. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And with that, it is the Packers bye week. So really didn't have a game to talk about, but there is some history in the bye week and curiously how well Green Bay does coming out of that. To tell us a bedtime story, Jeff, take us home.
This is a story all about the bye. You might think that the bye week, dreaded by fantasy football managers everywhere,
nobody cares.
Began when the NFL decided to extend the 16-game regular season by an additional week back in 1990. However, bye weeks actually started back in 1960 when the league had an odd number of teams due to expansion that year. Therefore, the first Packer bye week was October 16th, 1960. The next Packer bye week occurred 6 years later, again due to league expansion, on November 13th, 1966. Regular bye weeks began, as mentioned, in 1990, with the Packer bye week that season, October 21st. In 1993, the season was briefly expanded to 18 weeks, with each team having 2 bye weeks, September 19th and October 17th, for the Packers that year. We're hoping that with an early bye week, it gives the Packers an extra week to practice and prepare, hopefully to reset and start the next portion of the season with success. Now, how has Matt LaFleur done? So he's 2-2 in games after the bye week, with both of those wins coming over the last 2 seasons. In returning games after the bye week, the Packers have gone 18 for 27 and 9 of the last 14. So they're definitely over 500 coming out of the bye week. Green Bay has enjoyed great success in games played after the bye week for the remainder of the season as well. So historically, the bye week has really served to reset the team. Since 1990, 32 seasons, the Packers have played the remainder of the season under 500 after the bye week only 8 times, with 2005 when they went 3-8, and 2008, interestingly enough, when they went 2 for 7, being the worst 2 seasons in this era. So again, since 1990, not too bad after the bye. So since 2009, the Packers are 77-44-1, which is a .635 winning percentage for the remainder of the season after the bye. All that being said, let's hope that we can and will have success, at least going 500 or better the rest of the season, because history is on our side.
Other than that 2008 season, which is kind of relevant.
And Lindsay commented that the Broncos are looking ahead to the 2 soft spots on their schedule. I think we've got a lot of soft spots on our schedule, and we'll probably talk about those next week. Right now, I'm just worried about getting wheels up. Let's get to Denver. Let's have a great time. Anything else you guys have before we get out of here?
One of the other things we have, other than the team sort of being able to refocus, is we've got returning players. And the team is going to be rejuvenated, I think, not just because of the time off, but because we're going to have players coming back. Aaron Jones coming back is a huge deal, but also looking at the offensive side, Christian Watson and Elgton Jenkins were clearly not yet at 100% in that last game. Getting them closer to 100% is going to get our offense moving a lot better. And on the defensive side, Jair had his first game back. We expect him to continue to get back to the Jair level that we expect. And then we expect that we're going to see Eric Stokes, our 2021 first-round pick, back for the first time this year. We'll get Quay Walker back, and maybe we'll even get Devondre Campbell back. That's a lot of really good players that we have potentially coming back for this game. In addition, just to the advantages of coming off the bye, those are all reasons for optimism this week.
I'm not only looking forward to seeing friends in Denver, hanging out, having a couple beers, going to the game, enjoying Denver, spending time there, but I'm also hoping that the bye week again does rejuvenate Green Bay, and that leadership, whether it's on the field or from the coaching staff, that shows up. The Denver team is in disarray. And like Lindsay said, she's, is this a soft spot? Is this not a soft spot? I see the Broncos perhaps being the soft spot here. I'd like to see a big win, a statement win by Green Bay coming off the bye, fully prepared with all of the players back. I mean, are there going to be mistakes again, young team? We may see that, but let's see more than a quarter of good football from these Green Bay Packers, right? Let's see, is a half too much to ask? Is 3/4 too much to ask for? Oh my God, can they put 4 quarters together? Let's not get crazy here. I would just like to see a win on the road, because from here on out, it's a long season. Let's hope for a victory.
Sure. Get those social media hot takes ready. Like, this is how you come out of the bye, or you had 14 days to prepare and this is what you give us. Or, of course, the Fire Joe Barry we'll be seeing as well. All right. If you're watching us on YouTube, then please hit subscribe and leave a comment. Find the GBC Podcast at Green Bay Chat. That's all one word. We are on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and Spotify, as well as Facebook at the GBC Podcast Green Bay Chat. and may you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Good night.